Hello and welcome back to the channel and another video in which I'm going to be revealing my top 12 favourite courses of 2K23. And before we start, I want to stress that this is my own personal opinion. That's not to say it's definitive, but these are the ones that I would choose as my own favourites. We're featuring here Pat's Catahoula Match Club, which isn't on that list, but it's too pretty not to look at. So without further ado, we're going to leap into my own top 12 and see what you think. Let me know down below. This is split into two parts, so episode 1, just 12 through to 7. Enjoy. In at number 12 with my favourite courses of 2K23, and it's Lone Grove, the solitary one of the official courses that makes it on. And it really deserves its place, despite all of the challenges that we faced when building these courses. I wouldn't have wanted anyone else to do this type of build than Energizer, who managed to produce a fantastic course that plays really well, honours the spirit of Augusta National whilst not ripping anything off, and absolutely found the balance between nods and homages to holes or green sites and not ripping something off, which is phenomenally tough to do. The fact that he managed to do this in under 3 weeks with a pretty broken version of the designer is testament to his skill and ability in the course. Now, the course itself plays really, really fun. It works exceptionally well, and more than anything, it captured the tournament atmosphere, as you'll see on the approach up to 18, better than any of the other official courses by quite a distance. Just a fantastic piece of work. Personal favourite of mine was always the second hole, which does mimic the second Augusta. Here you wanted to hug the left-hand side but not roll through, and then you got a better angle into this green, which was totally defined by that sort of diagonal false front. It was really fun to play, particularly early game when nobody really had great control over the shots, and just watch how some of those feeder soaps really helped. My personal favourite hole on this course was always the fifth, and here it's just the way in which strategic options are created through two hazards used beautifully. One was the camber heading towards the river, and then that little river at the bottom. So you chose how far you wanted to play down, what angle you wanted to leave yourself in, and what club you thought would do that best, and then just waited and saw as the ball rolled down towards the water. It's a hole that has so many different options depending on wind, driver distance, etc., and it plays really well. Whilst an honourable mention has to go to the 15th and the boat stands that never were, I always loved the 18th and thought it was just such a good closer. You know exactly where you are and what we're paying tribute to, but the hole just worked really well. And I have a personal nightmare of having putted off into the front bunker multiple times. That said, the gallery around this green made it perfect. It was a really challenging hole to finish on, and it did so without being tricked up in any way, shape, or form. Just an awesome finish. Doing a very friendly, easy course well is one of the most challenging things. It's really hard to keep people's interest without it being too easy. And yet, I thought Seven Pines by Pat Lavar did that absolutely brilliantly. It's one of my favourite courses of this game cycle. And if you're in for a casual round and just want something that's nice and easy and comforting to play, this is one of the first courses you should go for. Based on Pinehurst, and it's not the only one in this list with that sort of a look, this one just really captured my imagination with how friendly it was. You could hit the ball a long way offline and still have fun shots into the greens, and the putts weren't overly onerous. Like, it was just kick your feet back and really enjoy. Additionally, it had a wonderful look on the Pinehurst sort of environment, with the green grasses working particularly well for me, and it's a course that I've already featured on the channel. Enjoy. I'm a sucker for diagonal bunker strings, and the third really caught my attention straight away. One annoying centerline bunker makes you think about exactly where you're laying up, but it was this bunker cluster down the right-hand side that really made it for me, along with a green that featured a roll in front, which maybe made those approaches a little more tricky. It's a masterclass in green sculpting on this one. There's a lot of subtlety involved and some really nice pin positions. An easy trope to fall into on any Pinehurst inspired course would be that all of the greens always fall off. Now, the eighth, which is a sort of drivable hole, kind of does that on one side but not on the other, and that lends it all the more interest. Here, you could try and drive it, and you had to hook a drive around the trees to do it, or you could lay up to the top of the hill and leave a much easier approach in. But again, the green complex made this one just angled away from the line of play, really entertaining. The par threes on this course were always particularly strong, but 15 was my favourite. It had a huge amount of space to the left, which I thought worked really nicely, and then that devilish bunker in front of the green, which separated some of the pin positions. As you can see, you can work the ball towards pins with quite a different number of shots, but those front two pin positions were always my absolute favourite. Again, a really good set overall, but this was the crown jewel of them for my money. At number 10, an entry that came kind of out of nowhere with Ryan McConnell's Dancing Nun. And this one, despite all of the silly names that we've had from courses in the past and the feeling that it's not taken totally seriously, which it isn't, this was outstanding. And if you haven't played it or you kind of missed it when it came out, go and give it a play, because the back nine in particular I felt was really, really strong. There's a lot of great holes on here. And it used a creek really nicely. This one, I think, paid a little bit of homage to Augusta, but also some like Mid Pines area vibes. I don't really know, but it's all of that low country golf done really, really nicely. And there were a ton of holes that were just very, very interesting. So we're going to dig into a few of them now. There's a lot of good holes and a lot of good greens on the front nine, but I think the ninth was possibly my favourite. So a camber that took you from right to left, but loads of space to work with, led you towards a green complex where that was really what captured your attention. There was a big kicker slope on the left-hand side that worked the ball over, but then a subtle roll that split front and back as you made your way back to the clubhouse. And the approaches into this one, really interesting. Playing at the top of the property, the 11th was probably my favourite of the par threes, featuring a front-to-back green that you had to be careful not to wipe a fade into. This one was really featuring some really cool diagonal bunkering, a tiny green that required accuracy, and some low-key, really good planting around it as well. It's a really enjoyable hole. Asking players to work the ball around trees is always really tricky to do and not have it feel forced, but I thought the 14th did a masterful job of it. You managed to play the fade, you ended up down the right-hand side of this fairway with a chance to go for the green in two, but the challenges didn't stop there. It was a long and narrow green with water just to the right, so if you happened to bail at all right, you ran the risk of ending up in a watery grave. But it was a really interesting hole that asked some challenging questions. In at number 9, and we have Heisenberg's Kasota Hill. Now, this is a course that really grew on me over the course of the World Cup. I initially didn't love it, particularly I felt the first 6 holes were kind of cramped and then it opened up a lot. But I really warmed to it over the course of that contest and it became one of my firm favourites. I think part of that was it was quite a unique look. It took a load of chances in terms of stylistically, it does a lot right. There's a ton of work that's gone into kind of the retaining wall bunkers, but really just like I loved being on this plot. It was a load of fun. It felt like nowhere I'd ever played before and therefore was kind of really creative. Add to that some really fun hole designs, and you had a course that stuck with me so well throughout the course of this game. One of the holes that really stuck out to me on this course was always the 5th, a short, drivable par 4, where you played from an elevated tee down to a fairway, and you had a number of layup options defined by a couple of big bunkers waiting for you. However, if you did choose to drive the green, you had to land it just short and roll it on, and you had that bunker at the back, which was just death waiting for you. I thought it was a really interesting drivable par 4, and one that you could play multiple ways on multiple different days. Hole 15 is both interesting to play and also wonderful to look at. So you have the sand all the way down the left-hand side of the hole, which provided a hazard, but tons of fairway to work with. However, if you played too far right, you were then hitting over that bunker towards this awesome bridge that you managed to put in with a little tunnel underneath. The punch bowl style green always gathered balls that were a little further away from the flag. Just a load of fun to play. Heading through the tunnel brings us to the next hole, which was the 16th, and another short 4 that I really liked. With this one, it was all about the green site. I think I probably could have lost one of the central bunkers, but I love this green tucked in by the elbow of water and a load of ways to make it close, as well as this beautiful waterfall framing the back of the green, opening back up over the clubhouse. 8th on my list is Scottish's Moore County, which was the first really novel take in a while we've had on Pinehurst as a theme. Granted, this one was helped by some new textures that got added to the game, but the planting is particularly good and just really nailed the vibe, in my opinion. Additionally, the bunkering was always interesting, the whole design's thoughtful and challenging, and just so much of what I think made this really special, I guess, was the spacing involved. You look at the corridor that this one has, partly in order to facilitate the lighting, I think, but this works so damn well. Additionally, he had to fight through a lot of stuff with this. You may remember that the course file he originally was working on, I think, got corrupted and he lost a good month or two's worth of work. But really glad that he persevered with this because it's an absolute all-time favourite and well worth a round if you haven't played in a while. The first of my favourite holes here is the fourth, which is a mid-length par 4 that works up to an awesome green site. You've got a number of bunkers that punctuate the landing zone and make you think about which angle of attack you want to take on and how much club, etc. But where this one really stood out to me was this green in the middle of some small foothills that kind of feels slightly propped up but also slightly falls off in loads of different ways. It was just a really cool green site, and I love the bunker cutting in front as well. Close proximity from green to tee is always a sign of a really good routing, and as you can see, 4 and 5 are a great transition to one. Here again, you've got a par 3 that's just balanced between some little foothills and a really interesting green that slopes in all sorts of different directions. Not a green you wanted to miss, but there was a load of short grass if you did miss in the right spots, and I love the fact that there were places you just simply couldn't go on this hole, left of the green being the main one. The mid-length par 4s here were really strong, and 14 was no exception. Here, the green being separated just kind of hovered like a little island, and you chose how far to put your drive down there before working out how to get the ball to first get up to the green and secondly stop before it hit that false front and just in front of that pin. Wherever you were at, you're always going to have to confront that front bunker, and again, you can see there's a ton of movement on this green and no putts were easy. As is often the case, our design contest produced some of the best courses of the last couple of years, and the recent Dream Team was no exception, with Maddie from Canada's Wnermaker coming in at number 7 on my list. This one featured a plot from Pithy Dr. G that was really interesting and one I'd have loved to have built on. Influenced pretty heavily by Shore Acres and a couple of other courses in that sort of area. This one had loads going for it, and as ever with Maddie courses, there's a ton of interesting golf and challenging shots to be hit that you always have to be thinking about where you're playing, with the creative bunkering particularly testing your game. Where I thought this one shone was its use of the little ravines and barrancas that threaded their way through the plot and eschewing the cliffside in order for just really good golf. This is probably not my favourite Matty course, but it's a really good entry, which is all the tougher on a plot that you don't design yourself and where you have to stick to some restrictions. So I'm going to dig into this one a little more. On a very tight plot, you can see how close this one is to a previous green. This one really made the most of the natural features, and I thought the back 9 was where it started to absolutely sing. The 11th hole gave you a ton of options off the tee as opposed to where you wanted to be, which bunkers you wanted to avoid, how far down you wanted to go before feeding you closer to the ravine again, and some really bold green contours with one mound particularly dictating your approach angle and strategy. Just an interesting natural hole that this contest produced in abundance. Almost a cousin of the 11th, kind of approaching the same area from the opposite direction, is 15. And this one has some similarities but a lot of differences. Most notably, you can have that heroic carry over to the right-hand side, and then the green, which was very much almost as it was found. So that big slope at the front of the green pretty much existed from day one on the plot that Dan had originally made. And that really dictated your strategy all the way back to the tee, because you don't really want to try and run a shot over that, but you could do if you felt that was the right play. As you can tell, I was a sucker for the holes around the ravines, just because I thought the ravines were so nicely done on this course. And 17 is the sort of hole that's just really quirky and interesting. You could try to drive towards the green, but you'd be mad to do so. So you were basically laying up for an approach into this one, and I thought this one had the best setting on the course. From the moment this was routed, Matty and I were chatting a lot through the design process. This is one that was always going to be a favourite of mine, and it didn't disappoint in its final form.